Okay, well, it's 2 o'clock, and thank you to Michael, Judith, and Stephen for signing in. This is our first webinar, SEGRA's first webinar, and interestingly, in terms of technology and how you join the world, whilst we've been waiting to start this teleconference, I've just had a FaceTime request from Saudi Arabia. So it's
wow.
It shows how small our world is becoming. This is the first in a series of webinars being conducted by SEGRA, and the idea behind it is to make some of the keynote speakers from SEGRA last year available to a wider audience. SEGRA stands for Sustainable Economic Growth for Regional Australia. It's been going for 22 years and is now recognised as Australia's most credible independent voice on issues affecting regional, rural and remote Australia. So for those of you who haven't been to SEGRA, welcome, and we hope to see you at SEGRA 2018 in Mackay, particularly the Queenslanders who are participating today. If you're not on our Facebook or LinkedIn, can I encourage you to go onto our website, www.segra.com.au, and sign up for the newsletter, Facebook and LinkedIn, and this will give you access to news, stories and events as they affect people living in regional, rural and remote Australia, people who live, work and invest in it. So it's of wide-ranging interest to a lot of people. Before I introduce Dave Clare, who was in fact voted the best speaker at SEGRA last year, I'd like to go over some of the basic Zoom technology. You'll see along the bottom a series of buttons, and although we only have a small group on today, we are going to actually use the Q&A button to lodge questions. So some of you have already typed on the chat page, but we're going to use the Q&A button for the questions. And the reason for that is that Zoom records all the questions and gives them back to us afterwards. It will give me an opportunity to curate questions as they come in, but it will also mean that Dave will be able to answer some of those questions more fully if necessary after the webinar and circulate them to people who've expressed an interest during the presentation. The format's been designed so that Dave will actually speak for 20 minutes and then we'll open up for questions. So we will hold questions. You can write questions, but we'll hold answering any questions until we've heard the entire presentation. As the whole group doesn't have audio, I will actually ask Dave the questions on your behalf, but of course you're welcome to use the chat button to talk to each other or ask other sorts of questions. Although Dave is very familiar with Zoom, this is our first ever webinar, and if it's similar for you, please use the chat box to ask technical type questions, and Rochelle will do her best to answer them. If that fails, you can also try texting her on 0474 747 773. So I might just briefly run over who else is on the teleconference. We've got people joining us from Victoria, Queensland and South Australia, and of course Dave's from Western Australia. A majority of those who are joining us today happen to be business people, which is really great. People from digital business, tourism business, design and regional planning. And then we have some representatives from regional, rural and remote local government. So it's a great mix of people that we have on the line today. I know you'll enjoy the presentation. As I said, Dave was recognised as the best speaker at SEGRA last year. Probably there were many bests, but he was the best of the best. However, as an extra incentive for people to stay to the end, Dave has generously donated a copy of his very latest book on leadership called Simplified: Leadership is Simple, You Lead People. It now gives me much pleasure to introduce you to the Prophet of Purpose, Dave Clare, to talk to us about the circle of organisational leadership. Dave isn't just a leader, he's also an author, award-winning international coach and facilitator. He's actually developed a new framework for leadership that helps others move from a business model to a model business. Dave's take on leadership for a new generation has proven to create invincible cultures that unleash credibility and innovation, the catalyst for disruption. So over to you, Dave.
Thank you so much, Kate. Now, just as you were going through that, the internet started staggering. So we'll do a quick prayer to the internet gods that we don't lose the broadband connection in here. But anyway, so I'm very excited. So let me just move to sharing my screen. And whilst I'm very familiar with Zoom, I'm usually on the other end. So this is very exciting to be on the driving end of Zoom. Firstly, so thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. And for all of you participating on this webinar, thank you for giving up your time to be here to listen to me one more time. For those of you who are at the SEGRA conference, which is one of the most fantastic conferences that I've actually ever been to. So maybe that's why I did such a great job, because of the quality of the conference. But I really want to take this second opportunity to delve deeper into one of the subject matters which really opened up some eyes and some minds and some hearts of the people at the conference last year, and that was the circle of organizational leadership. The exciting part of that was it was actually presenting something a little bit different in terms of how we lead organizations. And it's what I call for leaders is taking on a bit of a radically cool quest, because I'm going to ask you to think differently about your organization or organizations you participate in, and to look at a different way than we're normally used to in terms of the way we structure our organization. So without further ado, I want to go through the leadership, the radically cool quest. But I want to start with telling you a little bit of a backstory, and that to me that I believe that leadership is absolutely broken in the world right now. We'll leave Donald Trump aside, but leadership is in crisis mode around the world. You don't only have to look here in Australia at some of the challenges that we've had lately with the AMPs and the CDAs and various other organizations where the values and the integrity of organizations have come under question, especially larger organizations. And that's part of the problem. If you look at organizations, that leadership is held at the top, the vision's held at the top, the values are held at the top of the organization. And it slowly but surely may dilute its way down through the layers, but doesn't live and breathe at every single layer of the organization. And they always say that the fish rots from the head down, and that's what's happening in a lot of organizations around Australia today. And we are at the receiving end of all that as consumers and as regional Australia. Yeah, leadership is broken. If you look at the stats, Gallup and Deloitte do studies all around the world in 142 countries, 900 million employees. That's about 70% of the workforce are actually disengaged in the work that they're doing. Yet on the flip side, we're spending $50 billion per annum to make leadership better. So, that's why I say it's broken. How can we be spending so much money to make something better when the stats are getting worse? So something needs to change. And I think it's time we get back to the fundamentals of leadership, and that is that we lead people. And therefore, in an organization, we need to make sure we have a structure that's in place that will allow us to do that. Because leadership's ultimate job is to cultivate more leaders, not more followers. My definition of leadership is helping people become the best version of themselves so they can do their life's best work while in your care and beyond. And so in organizations, we need a structure that actually allows leadership to grow, not to have a bunch of followers. And so that's another challenge. So we've got all this stuff going on, and not only that, walking into an uncertain world where predictability is out the window. So how do we have a structure that cultivates leaders, allows us to move forward in an agile and flexible way? This is what the circle of organizational leadership is all about. So statistically, once again, the structure of organizations is under attack, changing the nature of work in companies. 92% of CHROs and CEOs tell us they believe that their structure must change and are looking for ways to flatten their hierarchy and make jobs more dynamic. And that's from Josh Bersin, the founder and principal at Bersin by Deloitte. So all the studies and stats are saying that organizational structures need to change. So we need to disrupt. It's all great to be innovative, but disruption is about creating a model that makes the old model obsolete. And I think it's time that we came up with a new model for leadership. But before I get into that, I want to tell you a little bit of a story I don't know if many of you know about King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. Some of you listening may be very familiar with this story. But King Arthur, legendary in terms of he led his kingdom by a round table. As you can see in the picture there, Camelot had all the knights sit at the round table. And these knights who sat at this round table, they all had to prove themselves in the adventures that they had to live by a code of chivalry. They all had to share this code that they all believed on before they could even get a seat at the table. They also all had to be there to serve Camelot, which was the purpose, which was taking care of the people of Camelot. So in the middle of the table, they would have Camelot, and then all of them would sit around the round table because they've earned their seat there because they demonstrated their ability to be chivalrous in terms of the values of what Camelot stood for. And King Arthur himself, when he would sit at the table, he would remove his crown and sit at the table. And there's a bit of dialogue on the screen there from the movie King Arthur, where one of the people says, "A round table, what sort of evil is this?" To which the other person responded that Arthur says for men to be men, they must first all be equal. Now, taking the sexism out of that, for people to be people or leaders to be leaders, they must all first be equal. We need to make sure that everybody who sits around our round table is treated as an equal. And to me, this is, either King Arthur was the first purpose-driven leader, but this is a wonderful metaphor for me in terms of way we should lead organizations going forward. And that's having a clear sense of purpose, a set of values that we all live and breathe by and demonstrate, and that we all sit as equals around the table. This, once again, is another reflection of what the circle of organizational leadership is about. So to me, leadership is really simple. You lead people. And it is absolutely time to lead different in our organizations. And Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, well, you just don't understand it well enough. So as a refresher for those who are at SEGRA, and for those who aren't, I'll just simplify leadership, because this is really critical that your organizational structure is set up to deliver these things. So the three things people want is something to believe in, they want someone to believe in them, and then they want someone that they can believe in. And that is having a sense of purpose for the organization. Why does our business exist? I want to know that there's more here than just getting up and coming to work, getting a paycheck and going home. And I assure anyone who's listening on this webinar that nobody gets out of bed in the morning and goes, gee, I can't wait to make the boss rich today. So it's not even about making money. What it is about having a greater sense of purpose as to what we're doing in terms of the work that we're here to do. Who are we here to serve? Then the second thing, of course, is someone to believe in them, and that's a leader who empowers with values. I want to be liked. I want to be trusted. I want to be responsible in the roles that I fill in an organization, and I want to have the ability to make decisions. No longer can we live in a world where people are just paid to work and not think. We need to make sure that people are paid to think and do work while they're there. But the challenge for organization is we need to find a way to show them how to think, not what to think. And that's the importance of having the values in your organization. And then the last thing, of course, is someone to believe in, and that's a leader with an inspiring vision. So we need someone who can see a world that's bigger than each of us as individuals, but combined, we can create something magical in the world. So we as leaders need to provide that sense of purpose to our team. We also need to be the person who believes in our team, and we need to be the person that our team can believe in. So we also need to have a structure that allows that to flourish. Get my screen in advance. Here we go. So the first thing, I want to break them all down very quickly, and then we'll show you how it fits into the circle of organizational leadership. So the first thing is a sense of purpose. I'm a firm believer that I don't care if you're Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen X, baby boomer, wherever you fit on the spectrum, that everybody wants their lives to be more meaningful. So our job in the organization is to give them work that is meaningful. So we need an organizational structure that allows people to be engaged in the work that they're doing. And that's what purpose is for. So it gets us out of bed, it drives us. Then we need to have a set of core values, our code of chivalry, that we have every conversation, every single one should either start with our values or bring the values into them. This is the unique thinking of the organization. This is how we choose to think around here, not what we think. This is about not having honesty and integrity and trust as in terms of motherhood statement values. Those are all wonderful, but they're not what makes our organization unique. If honesty, integrity, and trust is what makes us unique, we're in trouble as a business. That should be the price of entry to any organization to succeed into the future. What we need to look at is the uniqueness of how we think about our organization. What is our code of chivalry to which we choose to live by? Because this is what you will use to empower your team to make decisions. so that they can feel trusted and then become more responsible. And then the last, sorry, before I get, I'll use this here, just bring this up. The point of having that then is so that we can create an invincible culture that unleashes innovation in our organization. I'm not sure how many of you are enjoying this webinar right now would love to have an invincible culture that unleashes innovation. When we talk a lot about innovation in regional Australia, I think this is a critical thing. But most of us look outside for innovation. And I'm saying, well, innovation is the prefix of in, which is within, and novation is to do something different or change. So we should be changing from within. So if we use our values, which actually builds trust, which then allows our people to be responsible. When they're responsible, they can be free to think. When they're free to think, they become creative. And when we're creative, that's how innovation happens. So this is the power of having a strong set of code of chivalry for your organization. And then the last thing, of course, then is a vision, which is the picture of the world. And the point of a vision is making sense of what we're doing today so that our team go, okay, now I get it, because it's helping us build this world that we see for tomorrow. And they will be inspired. So now we'll have an organization where we have a purpose which engages people. We'll have values that empower people. We have a vision that inspires people. The challenge now is to have an organizational structure that allows that to happen. So those three things are what I call the leadership framework. And as you can see on your screen there's a picture of the leadership framework, which is quite simple. Well, there's a purpose that drives us. We've got values that guide us and a vision that inspires us. And then all we need to do in organization is reverse engineer the organization we need to become to create that world. And then we look at the strategic horizon, so build our strategy from that, which then will lead us to building our organizational goals that we need to accomplish in the next 12 months, which is all aligned from the purpose to the vision through the values. And the important thing here then, the point of having that is that goals dictate structure, not the other way around. So you need an organizational structure that not only drives purpose and values to create the vision, but also that is agile and flexible, that can change with the goals of the organization. And to me, this is the biggest challenge right now for organizations, is that our structures are very rigid instead of flexible. And we need to find a way that we can build a structure that can change with the goals of the organization. So anyone know, obviously, Elon Musk? Elon is probably one of the most exciting entrepreneurs in the world today. He wrote an email to his team at Tesla, and I'll just quickly share some highlights from it. And he said there's two schools of thought about information, so how information should flow within companies. By far the most common way is the chain of command, which means that that you always flow communication through your manager. The problem with that, though, is it serves to enhance the power of the manager, but it fails to serve the company. So Elon felt that he needed to make some significant changes in his organization to break down those barriers because everyone is in the same boat. And he felt that it's incredibly dumb to have all this information flow up and down through the chains of command rather than people just talking to each other. And one final point he made for his managers is that they should work hard to ensure that they're not creating silos within the company that create an us versus them mentality or impede communications in any way. It's an unfortunate and natural tendency, and it needs to be actively fought. How can it possibly help Tesla for departments to erect barriers between themselves to see their success as relative within the company instead of the collective of the company? So he said, we're all in the same boat. Always view yourself as working hard for the good of the company and never for your department. So organizational structures, though, unfortunately, are set up mainly through a chain of commands establishment. The only thing I think you as leaders or we as leaders should be looking at from a chain of command is being command and control of the framework of the organization, which is the purpose, values, and vision, not the actual how things happen within the organization. So Buckminster Fuller said, you never change things by finding the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So I introduced to you the radically cool circle of organizational leadership, which is much like King Arthur's round table. So I'm hoping everyone can still hear me because it's saying my internet connection is unstable. Yep, okay, great. So the circle of organizational leader puts the customer-centric purpose in the middle of everything we do. And then it's surrounded by the values. And if you look at the light blue dots, that's all the positions within, say, your team. So if this is an organization that I lead, each one of those would be person, say, in a 10-person organization. That's all of us in the team there. And I might get paid a certain amount because I have different responsibilities to a trainee who gets paid a certain amount to a different person, but we all have a direct line of sight to the customer-centric purpose through the values of our organization. So every time we sit down to discuss things, we're all working towards that customer purpose through the values. Nobody is above those things. So this is how you'll cultivate effective engagement within your organization, because everyone answers to something, not someone. We all answer to the purpose. Ownership and responsibility and accountability to the whole, not just your own role, is developed. And it facilitates an increase, as it says there, broader, deeper, and more productive discussions in your organization. People may be remunerated differently, but because we all have different goals and things, but we all answer to the same thing through the values. And all discussions, opportunities, and decisions are filtered through the unique thinking of our organization. And this is how you empower your team and develop leadership from within. Because leadership is all about purpose, values, and vision. So if we have every single person working from that, then that's what we need to have our organization set up to do. And the next diagram that's just popped up is what it would look like in a larger organization. So there in the center is the senior leadership team, and then one of those leaders turns around and they lead another team of people, and this puts the purpose and the values in the middle of every team that we have. It's organic, it's cellular, it's an ecosystem, not an ego system. And hierarchical structures are based on ecosystems where we reward the manager, not the people. This way, it's an ecosystem where we're all working together. And us as human beings, we are cellular beasts. So it's a natural way to look at our organization and creating it in an emulation of our own form. And so that's really the layout and the structure. And this I'd like to share just a couple last things because we're probably running low on time. But top-down leadership is a thing of the past. All around leadership for us in organizations is the way forward. We pay all this money to have this talent and abilities in our teams, yet we don't allow all of it out. So if we allow and we cultivate this new sense of leadership where everyone's working together, you're going to tap into talents and abilities that you did not know existed in your organization. And a lot of organizations, you don't need to hire more people. We just need to let out more of what we've already paid for. So in hierarchical structures, everyone answers to someone. In the circle of organizational leadership, everyone answers to something, the customer-centric purpose. And just some simple rules, which we'll say rules are guidelines for circles, which I'd like to share before I get into the last slide. I'll just bring them up here. So when you set up your circles, ensure everyone has a direct line of sight to that purpose through the values. Make sure everyone understands what the values are. They own them. They not only know what they are, but what they mean and what behaviors they drive. And everyone has clearly defined goals in terms of why their role exists. Then when you look at the circle for organizational leadership, when you're want to generate ideas, you throw an idea in the middle, and progress and rewards are based on ability and talent, not position. The best idea wins. It doesn't matter who it came from. You can look at criticism, disagreements. Anyone can put their honest thoughts forward in the circle of organizational leadership, and they can be challenged or they can challenge another. And we need to embrace and allow thoughtful disagreement to happen, because this is where innovation happens. And everyone is held to the same high standards in the circle. And it really demonstrates a healthy intolerance for substandard performance. Each member then should be allowed to realize their responsibility to the team in achieving that common purpose. And there's a sense of accountability where everyone is accountable to the purpose through the values for their results. And then the goals are used to support the success in terms of the teams and accountability, and it becomes way more transparent because everybody is accountable to each other. And visual management becomes a place where nobody can hide, and it increases performance. So all these things happen when you create the circle for organizational leadership in your business. So my challenge to all of you is to certainly lead your teams to boldly go where you've never gone before, and take that radically cool quest of whether it be I don't care what you draw on paper in terms of your organizational structure, but if you philosophically lead in terms of King Arthur and his Camelot and the Knights of the Round Table, and put your customer-centric purpose in the middle and let everyone have a direct line of sight to that through your values, and you allow a deeper and richer empowerment, engagement, and inspiration to happen, you will achieve phenomenal success within your organization. So that is the end of my presentation. I'll just bring that up. And now I can hand, I think, control back to Kate. Is that right? So you're muted, so I can't hear you. So I'm going to just stop my share.
Thanks, Dave. That was very interesting. I have a couple of questions here, but I thought I'd give people a chance to reflect a little bit on what you've said. I've heard at least some of it before, and in fact twice, because you've been a repeat offender at SEGRA. The first time as a concurrent and then as a keynote. But I suppose I took a couple of things from that, and I was furiously writing notes. Apart from SEGRA, I'm involved in a company called Management Solutions, so my ears were very pricked up to some of the things you were saying. And I guess the first thing, and I've got a little show and tell here, I'm not sure how much that's showing, but
Yep.
it seems to be nodding at me. But one of the things that I noticed about what you was in your presentation that fitted neatly for me was, and I saw this as a bit of a diagram of how we spend our time, and that too many organisations actually spend their time in the reverse of this, talking a lot about behaviour, HR units devoted to behaviour and strategic roles and tasks, who's got to do what. Whereas in fact, if you have your goals right, the other things fall into place. And I just added a couple of things here in terms of your purpose, values and visions, ability and talents instead of roles. And I guess my mind was thinking a little bit along that after you said about how leadership is broken and gave some of the examples of perhaps the collapse in democracy, which I was reading about the other day in light of not only that crisis, but while we're having multiple changes in prime ministers and all the leadership issues that are going on there. And for me, it seems that it's a bit around the subject of that command and control, and that because our systems and organisations and patterns of leadership for so long have rewarded command and control, we neither have examples of alternative models, and the people who were really skilled at command and control were rewarded. Now they're at the top, but those skill sets don't work anymore. And I think that that's where, for me, I like your model of the circles, because it gives you the opportunity to get away from hierarchy and look at those flatter structures. That leads me, though, to the first question that popped up on the screen, which is, how do you, and I did take note of you saying things like being accountable to something, not someone, and that everyone's watching everyone else rather than a sort of management and hierarchy. And I did note you saying that people are appointed according to ability and talent, not roles. One of the questions is how then, and this may be a double question, I suppose, if reward has traditionally been making your way up through the ranks and based on doing tasks and behaviours, so you can say, well, I do that. Ability and talent is perhaps less transparent, less measurable. How do you create career ambitions and give a sense of being able to move forward and up in the organisation, sort of sub-leaders almost? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a fantastic question. It's one of the biggest challenges of moving forward today, because we're talking about moving up in the ranks when I'm talking about getting rid of the ranks. Does that make sense? Yeah, so I'm looking at, to me, we want to reward people for their talent and abilities. We want everything like that, and have people control of their destiny in terms of, and the beauty of climbing up the ladder is I could say, okay, if the next thing I want is to go here, I could see where the next step on the ladder was. What I'm challenging is we should get rid of all that. And reward and ranks should be based on the success of the organization. It will cause organizations to have to look at how we reward roles, performance, everything, because roles will all change with the goals. So we need to have a more goals-based rather than roles-based performance structure in the organization. And a few organizations already around there have actually moved everyone to a flat salary or flat income. Everyone gets paid the same. And then depending on what team and roles you're playing in, your remuneration can change with that. You know, this is one of the epic questions organizations need to ask themselves, Kate, is how do we build our business for the future while we're still stuck doing it the way we've always done it. But what also is happening in the world is the gig economy, and we're having people who will just be in, jobs for life are a thing of the past or becoming a thing of the past. Climbing the corporate ladder will become a thing of the past as well. People will be in an organization for a period of time, then move over to another organization and be part of that ecosystem for a while and learn and grab new talents and abilities there, then go to another organization. And the ladder you'll be climbing will be your own career ladder, not necessarily an organizational ladder. That's how I see it.
Thanks very much, Dave. There's two other questions that have come in, both of which relate to your answer, but I think I might flip to the third of those questions, which is still focusing on the government leadership, and we'll have another question on private business leadership to follow this. But in looking at regional Australia transitioning into the new economy, do you think that government leadership can change fast enough? If not, what can it do? I suppose an additional to that question is, what are some of the things that might provide impetus or incentive for leadership patterns to change away from the command and control, aside from by failing?
Yeah, so the first answer to the first question is no. Politics or governmental leaders, I'm not sure if we have too many what I would call leaders right now. We have governmental managers and we have politicians. Because once again, we get back to the essence of what leadership is all about, and it's about having a clear sense of purpose, the values and the vision, and building an organization to become the one that creates that world. I don't see much of that in politics right now. I see a lot of managers and even the leading politicians. To me, that's going to be a very slow battle, because also they're in some of the biggest disruption going on right now. If you look at what's happening here in Australia, we've got Amazon Go coming. We've got I think Costco and all these things, and everyone's reaching into Australia and going to be taking money out, and people are worried about we're going to lose all the basic wage positions, and who's going to be paying taxes if all that money is leaving the country, and we don't even know how we're going to drive revenue as a country at the moment. So they're in a state of flux to work out how we're going to handle all this, let alone the stuff we're doing today, but what the future is going to bring for them. And so that chaos for them, they're not sure how to handle that. And to me, I'm kind of excited by it in terms of, I think it's going to breed a whole new type of leader for our organizations and politicians. But we're going to have this kind of overlap at the moment of the way we used to do things to the way we do things going forward. And I think as a country, once we start asking different questions, we'll get different answers. We're all worried about how we're going to stop income from leaving the country, instead of saying, how can we go into other countries and pull income and bring it back to here? Instead of worrying about why Amazon's taking all that out and no jobs and all that, well, why aren't governments, supporting regional Australia or any parts of Australia where we're bringing entrepreneurs up that are going to go and take their business to the world and bring the world back to their business here in Australia? Because there's all this going on. So it's going to be a very long process. But if we don't start somewhere sometime, we never will. And we'll get left behind. Australia right now is already dropping on the innovation index in terms of in the world, because we're not being innovative enough. And that's led by government, but also by industry.
Hello?
Hi, yeah.
Is that right? Okay. Look, thanks for that answer. If I could just springboard with a couple of other things,
Sure.
Because at one level, I think you're right when you say that it is that crossover, and that it's very hard. I suppose I see government as following rather than leading very often in these spaces. But I suppose as the eternal optimist, and also seeing how innovative regional Australia is, there's a couple of things that I think people living in regional, rural and remote Australia can do that doesn't necessarily change government leadership, which I know was the question you were responding to, but can change leadership within regional Australia. And I guess I note one of my favourite sayings is there are no silos in regional Australia, when in fact, of course, it's the reverse. Silos are in regional Australia, and when we say governments are siloed in the city, we're stealing their phrases. But regional Australia has to be more networked and is more networked. And I think that capacity to network is going to be a key skill. And whether you call it network leadership or network teams or whatever, I think that networking and being able to work in a network is going to be a key skill that was shown really in your slides, but perhaps not that exact word, but that's one of the words that I guess I'm seeing in trying to unpack what gives regional Australia an advantage. I think that is one. But the other thing, I suppose, that I also say is that we have to have leaders who are good at finding solutions, brokering solutions, not just leaders, so that it's not, come on, let's tackle this, so much as being able to keep open the range of solutions for as long as possible. And hierarchical structures, such as you're saying we need to change from, I think another negative of them is that they tend to push us into having solutions too quickly. Because the reward is the solution. And I think it's keeping the solution open for longer. And I think your diagram in some ways shows that by not having hierarchies, you countermand that type of behaviour. The third question, and we might have to leave it at the end of this question, is back to the small business question that we had, that you touched on before in talking about how businesses as opposed to how government might change, and I'll just read it, it was written, small business struggles with letting go of command and control when owned privately. And so I think that's getting into the heart of the small business domain. An open book policy around financial position is an ideal that few will adopt, but in a non-hierarchical structure, I feel the team would function better when implemented. What are your thoughts?
So we talk about our thoughts about showing people the financials of the organization, or allowing them.
My understanding, an open book policy around financial position.
Yeah, and once again, that's an individual choice, I think, for the organization. But if it depends on how much you want to share with those people in the organization. Like a not-for-profit I lead up in regional West Australia, I share ratios and percentages and that of where the organization is, not necessarily all the finer details, because I want them to have an understanding of, growth patterns and where we are and things like that. But we do it more in ratios and percentages from that. So we choose to share it. It depends on, once again, how you choose to share that with your team. But I agree, the more information, if it's relevant to them and it helps them have a better understanding, then we should be finding a way to share that, something that makes sense to those people, because the more they seek to understand, the more engaged they can be in the work that they're doing. And I think it's a phenomenal idea for organizations. There's this fear of, well, if people see how much we're making, well, then they're going to want to be paid more, which as an understandable rationale when people are only there because they want to get paid more because they have no sense of meaning to what they're doing. But that people only, like, I'm going to get as much money as I can from this business while I can, because I'm not happy here until I can find something that'll make me happy. And so if we have that happening and then we show them the numbers so they can see how much money the business is making, well, they go, well, hang on, I want to get more money from you. But, so there's a whole bunch of, ingredients that go into whether you should or shouldn't show. But I think if you have an organization that's very clear on why it exists and what it's there to do, you should find some way, if helping the team understand financial implications of that business, then you should do that. If it helps them to understand better the role that they're there to perform and how we can make an impact and how we can add more value, but we need money to survive, then, you know, they need to understand that gives a sense of calling to the movement or cause that we're about. I just want to quickly touch, okay, so in the previous commentary you're making, innovation in regional Australia, absolutely. We've been almost forced to become innovative because we're not getting anything or very little from the government. So it's become a strength for us to become more innovative. So without a doubt, and we've to bugger this, we're just going to find a way to do it ourselves, right? So understand that. But this is where that organizations need to be more collaborative, and that circle of organizational leadership is a collaborative leadership model. So I want everyone who's on the webinar to understand that collaboration will not thrive when egos and logos are in the way, right? Collaboration cannot exist when there's egos and logos in the way. So even within a team, whether it's egos and that's departmental logos and leadership or management egos, or if it's this organization wanting to collaborate with that organization and that one, if we put egos and logos in the way, we'll never have true collaboration. And the purpose, getting very clear on the purpose of our organization, purpose solves problems. So get in touch with why your business exists, what it's there to do, and we'll solve problems. Then share all the relevant information that you need with your team to get them fully engaged, because when you have a fully engaged team and a totally empowered team and a totally inspired team, you'll revolutionize your world.
Thank you very much, Dave. That's been a fabulous presentation. I think we, in the interests of time, need to wind it up now. People have limited time. But if I could just finish with that, leadership is about collaboration, and you're talking about collaborative organisations. I think that is probably the take-home message for us from that, and looking forward to reading your book and finding out more about that. I'll just put in a quick plug for SEGRA, where one of the themes this year is in fact about collaboration and multi-level governance. And so I look forward to continuing the conversation with you, Dave. Then the next webinar will be on the 13th of June, and that will have Robert Prestopino speaking on design thinking and economic development. And he's one of the partners behind the Successful Regional Solutions project that some of you may have heard about. The last thing I have to do is to use my random number generator to see who gets the free book, and it is number 7. So Rochelle will look up, yes, there we are. Rochelle will look up who, sorry, Dave, turn the book. Rochelle will identify that number from our list, and we'll organise to get the book over to you. Thank you all very much for participating in our first webinar, and thank you again to Dave, and we look forward to seeing you at SEGRA 2018 in Mackay. Bye. Thank you.
See you all. Thank you.